Hi, Lindsay Keefe here. Thanks for joining me for this pelvic floor practice. So in these practices today, we're going to do some movement, we're going to do some breath, and the intention is to help us improve our relationship between the different parts of our body and our pelvic floor. There are some props that you're going to need for this practice. You're going to need a block. If you don't have a block, you could use something like a small couch pillow. You'll also want a yoga strap. If you don't have a strap, you can use a belt, scarf, or a resistance band. Think about something that you can tie up around your legs, and also something that you can sit on. So I'm going to use a bolster. If you don't have a bolster, you can sit on a chair or maybe grab a stack of blankets or pillows. So if you need to put the video on pause for a moment to collect a few things, do that now. Okay. And so now that you've got everything, I want to give you just a little kind of a quick anatomy lesson, just so we can get a sense of, where is our pelvis, what does it consist of. So you can see my little pelvic model here, and we're looking at this from the front. So you can see here at the front is our pubic bone. At the top is our top of our hips. So if you go from your waist and you kind of feel down, you feel kind of a bony landmark. That's the top of your hips. You can see the lumbar spine coming up at the back. And then these 2 points at the bottom are our sitting bones. So if you were to sit on your hands and give yourself a little wiggle, you'll feel 2 bony protrusions, and those are your sitting bones. And then from the back, you can see your tailbone, the sacrum. So the sacrum is the flat part of your low back, right about where your waistband would be on your pants. And we've got the spine coming up as well at the back. And then the whole pelvic bowl is the inside where all our internal organs are. So if we think about the pelvic floor, the muscles of the pelvic floor connect from our pubic bone to our sitting bones and our tailbone. And so they create a sling that holds our pelvic organs inside, and it also creates the musculature and support of our pelvic floor orifices that do all the good things that we need to do for elimination and childbirth and sex and all that kind of stuff. So pelvis rather, right? And then our leg bones connect to the sides and to the acetabulum, which is right about here. So here we go, here's our pelvis. And our pelvis moves if our legs are fixed, moves on our leg bones. You can go side to side, front to back, and then the spine and the torso come up from there. Okay, so just a little visualization so you have a sense of what I'm talking about as we go along. So let's get into this. Find yourself a seat either on a chair or straddling a bolster, or your stack of blankets or stack of pillows. So wherever you're sitting, we want to have the pelvic floor on whatever it is that you're sitting on. So if you're on a chair and you can't really feel that pressure, maybe sit on a pillow as well. So now we've got our pelvic floor resting on something. And just notice what that feels like. Oftentimes we don't bring a lot of attention to our pelvic floor unless there's an issue. And then if there's an issue, it's often hard to feel into. So wherever you are, just get really still and really quiet. And just see if you can sense where your sitting bones are. And if you need to actually get your hands in there and feel. Right? Feel where the sitting bones are connecting. Maybe feel where the pubic bone is connecting. And sometimes bringing heat, so if you have a heating pad, sitting on a heating pad can elicit more sensation as well. And then start to notice your breath. Feel the inhale coming in through the nose, moving down to the lungs, the belly, and then the breath moving back up. As we inhale, the diaphragm moves down changing the pressure in our abdominal cavity, and is also connected to our pelvic floor. So as we inhale and the diaphragm moves down, there's also a downward pressure into our pelvis. And then as we exhale, the diaphragm moves back up and the pressure comes out of the belly as it rises. Inhale, diaphragm moves down, pressure moves down all the way to the pelvic floor. And then as we exhale, that pressure lifts. And so we can actually start to sense a movement of our pelvic floor with our breath. And this can be really subtle, and you might not initially feel anything, and that's okay. So just sit quietly with your breath for a few moments and notice what you notice as you breathe. You may be able to sense a gentle downward pressure with the inhales and a lift or a release as you exhale. If your pelvic floor is really tight or tense, you might not notice anything. And so you can try consciously contracting the pelvic floor and then releasing it. Try that a couple times and see if that brings some feeling or sensation to the area. Squeeze up and then release. And then return to your breath. And just notice what you notice. And if you don't feel anything, that's okay. What we can also try is a different position. So from sitting, you can come to lying on your back. Maybe keeping the knees bent. And then imagine your breath, or sense your breath moving down, inhaling down to the pelvic floor, expanding. Exhale. Imagine the pelvic floor gently lifting in and up. Now you don't have to consciously press down or draw the pelvic floor in and up. This is just a natural reaction that our body has as we breathe. So try a few breaths on your back and see what you notice. Some people report being able to feel more as opposed to sitting. So this is where we can be curious and explore and see what works for you. Another option is to come down and lie on your belly. And so you might make a little pillow with your arms and just let the legs come apart a little bit. Let yourself settle. And then sensing the breath moving down to the pelvic floor as you inhale and rising in and up as you exhale. Some people sense more, have a greater awareness of sensation while lying on their belly. So if you'd like, you can put the video on pause and go back through, explore the pelvic floor breath and sitting and lying on your back or lying on your belly. If you've already noticed that one works better for you, then you can return to that one and maybe spend a minute or two sensing your breath moving in and out of the pelvic floor. If you didn't feel anything at all, you can go back through each of the positions, and maybe it becomes a bit of a visualization to start imagining the muscles of the pelvic floor moving down as you inhale and rising up as you exhale. And then just stick with that over the next couple days and then see what you notice. Typically, the clients that I've worked with, after about 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, they start to notice more sensation. They start to notice something going on down there. And so that can be really exciting and a really fun exploration. It's just you have to put in a little bit of time to practice. That's all. All right. So let's move on to our next practice. And so I'm going to grab my block. And the next practice is block and strap. So actually have your block and strap handy. So we're going to start by bringing the block between the legs. I'll go maybe on a little bit of an angle here. So it's not right between your knees. Kind of bring it as high up as you can. And then come to lying down. And you're just gently holding the block between the legs. And then bring the edges of your hands into your hip creases. So you'll be able to feel the muscles under your hands. And actually, if you take the block out for a second and you lift one leg, you should feel a ropey muscle kind of pop up into your hand. And you can do the same thing on both sides. So that's just feeling our hip flexors engage as the knee comes towards the chest. And so that's the job that's supposed to do. Now, with the block between the legs, we're going to squeeze the block between the thighs. And so this is no longer doing a horizontal or a vertical movement. We're doing a horizontal movement. So those hip flexors ought not engage. So by keeping the hands into the hip creases, as you squeeze the block, you can feel whether or not those hip flexors pop up. And if they do, go a little bit softer with your pressure. So don't squeeze quite as hard. And just keep going softer and softer until both hip flexors stay quiet and you're not feeling anything funky through your low back or further up your body. And so we're just going to squeeze and release, squeeze and release. And so in working the muscles on the inside of the legs and keeping the hip flexors quiet, these muscles are all in the neighborhood of our pelvic floor. And so the function of one impacts the function of the others. So we want to be able to have good movement of our leg bones in the hip sockets for a healthy pelvic floor. You can do about 10 of these. And then set your block off to the side. Then we're going to take our strap, or whatever you're using for your strap, and we're going to loop it around the legs, around the thighs, and you want to tighten it up so that the legs are still about hip distance apart, same distance as with the block. And so you can feel now the strap around the outside of the thighs. And we're going to bring the hands back into the hip creases so you can feel the tissue under your hands. If you need to check those hip flexors again, you can lift one leg and then the other. And now the movement is pressing the legs out into the edges of the strap. So with the block, we squeezed in, and now we're squeezing out. And so my feet, there's nothing happening with my feet. It's just the movement of my upper legs. And if you feel the hip flexors pop up, let's go a little bit softer. And make sure you're breathing softly. If you feel something in your low back, go a little bit softer still, right? The effort's just in the legs. And after you've done, about 10 or so without those hip flexors popping up, then you can take the strap off. And then maybe rolling to the side. And if you want, you can come up to standing, and you can notice how you feel there. Our next practice is going to bring us over to the wall. So let me move some of this stuff out of the way. And we're going to bring the legs up the wall. So I like to start sitting sideways so I can get as close as I can, and then swinging the legs up the wall. And so you want to be fairly close, but at a distance where your sacrum can be flat. So if the pelvis is really tilted and you can't get in this close, you might want to just skip this one and then go forward to the next one. So here with the legs at the wall, we can just take a moment to settle. Imagine that your pelvis is made out of clay and your leg bones are dowels sinking down into that clay. And we might even return to the practice of breathing into our pelvic floor. Inhaling, imagining the pelvic floor expanding out, and exhaling, a gentle inward lift. And see what you notice here. So you might find that you feel more through the pelvic floor with the legs at the wall than you do in sitting or lying on your belly or lying on your back. So we're going to start with the right leg. I'm just bringing my hands onto the thighs, and we're going to rotate the thigh out to the side and then back to center. And in doing this, notice if your pelvis wobbles. And if it does, just start to make your movement smaller. So we want to see if you can isolate the movement of your leg bone in your hip socket. And so the muscles responsible for this external rotation of the thigh are kind of like deep in your bum, which is in the neighborhood again of our pelvic floor. So having good movement is going to help with stability and strength, not only through our hips, but also through our pelvic floor. And then we can do the same thing on the other side. And you might find that one side feels much different compared to the first side. It can also be helpful if you have like a tennis ball to kind of bring that underneath your hip so that as you rotate the leg out, you can actually feel those muscles engage. My legs are shaking a little bit. It's cold out here today. So you can explore 5 to 10 rotations on each side. And then we just come back and settle for a moment. And then let's try this. Lift the right leg so the heel comes off of the wall. And then you're going to cross the ankle. So notice how I didn't bend my knee. Just lift the leg, bring it straight across, and the ankles cross. And just pause for a couple breaths. And then you can bring your hand back into that right hip crease if the right ankle's over top of the left. And then start to slide your ankle down the shin. And then back up. So as the ankle comes down, the knee's going to bend, and there's also going to be flexion at the hip. We just want to feel that we only go as far as that hip flexor doesn't pop up. And then as your leg goes up and down, notice if your pelvis wobbles. Right? Does it drop to the side? Does it tilt? So if that sacrum's not staying perfectly flat on the floor, if you can feel something happening, just go a little bit smaller with your movement. Perhaps don't slide down quite as far. Maybe you just go an inch. As you explore, we want to just have a sense of control and coordination of that movement. Feeling in control of the ankle sliding down, of the leg bone moving in the hip socket. That means the breath is smooth and even, flowing nicely. Pelvis is quiet. And then perhaps as you come into it, just hold. And then let's slide back up. Uncross the ankle and bring the foot to the wall. And then we're going to lift the left heel away from the wall, cross the ankle, and pause. Bringing the left hand into the left hip crease. Start to slide the ankle down the shin. Go slow. Making the movement smaller if there's a wobble in the pelvis or if there's something going on in the low back. If you're feeling strain up at the neck or the shoulders, see if you can find a range where that quiets down and you don't feel that strain. And then you can come down and hold. And as you're sliding the ankle, if you're feeling like there's a lot of resistance, like if you really have to work to move that ankle down, try a smaller range and just see if you can find more ease, right? You just want to make this as easy as possible for our body so that it can feel safe and in control. And we can slide back up and uncross. So if you want to put the video on pause here and you want to go back and explore each side again, absolutely feel free to do that. And then from here, we're going to slide the feet halfway down. And we want the knees to be over top of the ankles, so you might have to slide yourself back. So 90 degrees, knees over hips, feet flat on the wall. Feel the center of the heels, the base of the big toes, and the base of the baby toes. And the hands can be in the hip creases again. Breathing softly. And then gently start to press your feet into the wall and release. Press and release. And so you only want to press as much as the hip flexors don't engage, that the pelvis doesn't tilt. There shouldn't be any movement through the ribs or the upper body. And so if you feel kind of a tightening in your belly or your ribs, just go a little bit softer. Can you keep feeling those 3 points of the feet as you press? Breathing with ease. Super gentle. And then what happens if you press a little bit longer? Just explore this for yourself. What happens if you press more? What happens if you press less? How does your body respond? And then when you're ready, roll over to your side and then come up to sitting, or even come up to standing, and notice how you feel in standing. And then we're going to come into butterfly pose. So this is where we lie on our back and the feet, the soles of the feet come together and the knees come out to the side, okay? So come on down. If you need something behind your head, you can bring in a folded blanket. Just make sure that the forehead's not higher than the chin, because that just promotes a head forward position that is not really conducive to anything. So inside of the feet together, and then we're going to take the legs out to the side. And if you want, you can bring some blocks or some pillows underneath your legs. We're not going to be here for too long because we're actually going to do a more active version of this. But in your butterfly, feel your breath moving down to the pelvis. You might even bring your hands right down to your low belly so the fingertips rest at the pubic bone. If this feels uncomfortable for your low back, just bring your legs back together. Okay, so you can stay there a little bit longer if you want. Otherwise, follow along with me. So we're going to do more of an active version, kind of help strengthen the legs and release some of that congestion that can exist in and around the upper legs and the pelvis. So with the knees together, we're going to slowly start to lower down for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So just go as far as the legs will go without having to force. And then we're going to pause for a full breath. And now with control and coordination, we're going to bring the legs up slowly. I'm going to count you up for 15, 14, 13, make sure you're breathing, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. If the legs get shaky, that's okay. We're going to lower down again for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and pause. So notice as we start to come up, do the legs kind of like skip? You kind of go up quickly and then slow down? Or can you go at an even pace the whole way? Okay? Even pace, nice and slow. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lowering down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a full breath. And coming up, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do one more round, lowering down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And coming up. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Roll over to your side and gently come up. Okay. From here, we're going to actually, you can probably just stay on your back. So let's do that. Come onto your back again. And this is going to be some pelvic tilts. So I want you to think of your pelvis and your leg bones. Okay, so our legs are going to be fixed, which means the legs don't move, but the pelvis does. So we want to be able to tilt this pelvis forward and back. So we're going to start with, I guess, the backward tilt. So you can think of it as your pubic bone moving towards your nose. And as you do this, it might feel like your low back flattens, but we're not initiating the movement by drawing the belly to the spine or flattening the low back. I want you to think of it as more coming through the pelvis. And it doesn't have to be a big movement. Only go as much as the legs stay pretty still. I'm shaking a little bit just because it's so cold out here today. Oh my goodness. So try a few of those. And then we're going to tilt the other way. And so we want to initiate the movement through the pelvis. So the way I like to think about it is the tailbone, drawing the tailbone backward. So here's the tailbone, and you're drawing it back, back, back. So try that and see if that connects for you or not. You could also think of the hip points at the front as moving towards the knees. But notice if you have a tendency to want to move through the ribs. Keep the rib cage quiet. And just see if you can find a little movement through the pelvis. And then you can alternate forward and back. So you may not even be able to really see me move because the movement is so small. It's pretty subtle. But just take some time. And see what works for you. All right? Okay, so I just had to take a little break and go inside and warm up because it was getting pretty chilly out here. So we just finished doing the pelvic tilts and getting a sense of how our pelvis moves in relationship to our legs. So were the legs getting really involved? Was there a lot of movement there? Was there a lot of movement through the rib cage or shifting up through our head and shoulders? So you can come back again to lying on your back and exploring that pelvic motion, tilting and tucking, and just kind of see where there is a sense of tightness or a sense of ease and fluidity in that movement. All right. From here, we're going to come back down to lying on our back, and we're going to explore a twist. And I'm going to share 2 different twists with you, just because not all twists are made equally, and some can actually do more damage than what we need. So what I mean by I don't mean damage that they're going to hurt you, but they could. So in the first supine twist, I know for myself that I have a tendency to kind of grip through my shoulder, and it actually creates a lot of pain through my neck and my shoulder. So that's why I'm going to show you the option that I like to do, and then you can try both and see what you prefer. Okay, so let's come to lying down. We'll bring the legs all the way down. And then let's bend the right knee and bring the left hand across the body to the outside of the leg, and then your right arm's just going to rest beside you on the floor. Now feel the connection between both shoulder blades on the floor. We really only want to go as far as that right shoulder doesn't lift off. So we're going to start to bring that right leg across the body, and then the top of the right hip's going to move towards the left. And if it feels like the right shoulder lifts off, just come back to center and reset. And we can hold here for a few breaths. And then come back to center. And then we'll set up for the same way on the other side. Bend the left knee. Bring the right hand to the outside of the knee. Feel the connection between your left shoulder and the ground. And then when you're ready, drawing the left leg and the left hip across to the right. If the left shoulder blade lifted off, just come back and reset, and then don't go quite as far. We need to have a fixed part, so our chest, our shoulders are fixed so that the rotation can come through the hips and the pelvis. All right, and then come back and release. So that was twist option 1. The one that I like is coming into a figure 4. So you lift the leg, and like we did with the legs up the wall, you're going to rotate the thigh out to the side and then place the ankle on the knee. Now this isn't going to be available to everyone. If you're really tight and limited through your hips, you won't be able to bring your ankle to your knee without the hips shifting a lot. So if that doesn't work, just do option 1. And then from here, we want to find the rotation through the pelvis. So I've got my left foot up, so my left foot wants to move towards the floor. So let your right hip start to get heavy, taking the pelvis into a rotation. And again, only going as far as the shoulder blades don't lift up. And you shouldn't have to arch your back or do anything like that. Or if the pelvis is really wobbly, you might just be doing like a really tiny range. So think about, let me come back up for a second. We want to think about how the pelvis is moving in the rotation. So whether you're doing the first one or the second one. So here's the spine, upper body's here, legs are down here. So you're starting in this neutral position, right? And we want the pelvis to move like this, right? So if you're taking the leg across, the hip is following, right? It's just going side to side. But if you're noticing that there's like all kinds of like this wobbly, like it's tucking and then it's like one hip is coming higher than the other. If you're not getting that pure side to side motion, right? Like if this kind of thing is happening, you're kind of coming off kilter. Then we've lost the twist, and you can be creating strain in the back and other areas. So in order to really improve the function in relationship to the pelvic floor, we can just go a little bit smaller with the movement so you get that side to side. So let's try this again and see if that kind of makes a little bit more sense. If it doesn't, don't worry. Okay, so this time with the right leg up, I want the left leg to get heavy, so my fingers on my left hip point and my right fingers on my right hip point. So to start, they're level and they're even. Now as the left hip comes towards the floor, the right hip is following. Both shoulder blades are grounded. And I sometimes bring like my fingers so I can feel my hip points and my ribs at the same time. So I know if one side of my torso is shortening. So we don't want to get that kind of hip hike, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like we don't want one hip to hike up. So the distance between your ribs and the top of your pelvis stays the same as it rotates. I know that's a lot to think about, but it will help you to move really well if you can kind of start to notice those relationships, notice those connections. And notice how I'm not doing like, I'm just kind of gently rocking side to side, just helping my body kind of find that rotation. You can go into it and hold it. I don't go all the way to the floor because my blades will lift off. And then you can come on back. All right. Roll to your side, come on up. So now we're going to move into some standing practices. So come on up to standing, and hopefully I can find a place to stand where I'm not entirely off screen. I might have to back up a little bit here. Okay. All right, top of my head's getting cut off a little bit, but the main part is that you can see my legs and my hips. So we're gonna start in the standing in a mountain pose, feet hip distance apart, feeling into the center of the heels, the base of the big toes, and the base of the baby toes. So we've done some movement, we've kind of reorganized how our leg bones relate to our pelvis, how our pelvis relates to our ribs and to our legs. So you might feel a greater connection in your legs, you might feel like you're standing taller, maybe there's more awareness in your feet. Just notice whatever's there. And then we're going to let our hands come down to the side of the thighs. And you're going to press the legs where your hands are. Press the legs into the hands. And then notice what changes. So you can release and try it again. How your feet connect with the ground might feel different. There might be a sense of greater strength or awareness. Like the legs might be more present for you. I'm just going to hold that for a couple breaths. There might be a sense of engagement or strength through the pelvis or the abdomen. And then we can let that relax. So I'm going to turn sideways again so you can see. And we're going to move into a variation of pyramid pose. So I'm going to start by taking my right foot forward. And it's just a small step. I don't need to take a big step. We want to keep the pelvis neutral. Step the foot forward and bring it down. And if you feel unsteady here, you can bring the legs a little bit wider apart just so you have a wider base. And then we're going to start with the hands on the hips. And we're going to find that pelvic tilt just like we did when we were lying down. So I'm going to start with my tailbone. I want to think about or sense my tailbone lifting backwards, right? Lifting. And in doing so, my hip points are now starting to tilt towards the floor. Okay. And then to come back to neutral, I want to think about my pubic bone lifting up. So see if those cues work for you. Lift the tailbone, sensing the pelvis moving around the leg bone so the legs don't move, right? Our legs are fixed. And then pubic bone to lift up. It might be useful to think of the sitting bones, right? Our sitting bones at the bottom, lifting, coming backwards. And then maybe there's a gentle engagement or a flattening of the low belly along with the pubic bone that lifts the hips up. And the whole time, our spine, our ribs are staying neutral. So we're not pushing the ribs forward, we're not rounding the back. So if you feel something kind of happening in the upper body, just be curious about that. And then see if you can move in a smaller range where the upper body stays quiet. Or just kind of focusing a bit more down here. Coming forward and back. So essentially what's happening is a hinge, right? The pelvis is rotating forward. So this is not unlike when we're doing that chair sit, right? The same kind of motion of the pelvis, keeping that neutral spine, but the legs are not bending this time. It's just the pelvis moving around the top of the leg bones. And after you've done a few, you can step back and we can try the same thing on the other side. So settle from your hips, down your legs into your feet. Maybe sensing the 3-point of the feet on each foot. And then in terms of what you do with your hands, you can let them hang. I find it really helpful to either have my hands on the side of the hips or maybe one hand at the front of the pelvis and one at the back. And for me, like feeling the structure of the pelvis helps to guide the movement. And there's no need to rush. The more we can feel, the more information we have about how our body moves and what it needs. So if you're feeling like pinch or strain or tension somewhere, listen to that. Let that be a sign that maybe you can go a little bit slower, a little bit smaller with your movement. Finding a range where you don't feel those aches or strains. Or maybe there's no pain, but maybe you feel a lot of wobble. Maybe you feel really unsteady. So then see if you can explore a range where you do feel steady, a sense of steadiness or greater steadiness. So again, the movements don't need to be big. Like if I don't think about it, I certainly could go a bit further, but I feel more connection and more control in a smaller range. So that's where I work. Okay. And then we can come back to standing. And notice what you feel. Yeah. And I feel a little bit of imbalance, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's just because I've reorganized again how the pelvis is functioning in relation to the leg bones, and so something's kind of shifted up, and so there's a little bit of imbalance, which I'm not concerned about at all. I'm actually kind of pleased. That means maybe something has released that was really tight before. Okay, let's bring our legs a little bit wider apart. And so we're going to do the external leg rotation, just like we did when the legs were up the wall, and we turned the leg out and back to center, but now we're doing it in standing. And so this may feel different because now we have the load of our upper body being supported by the legs, and before there was no pressure on the legs. So we want to keep the pelvis neutral, just like we did when we were lying down. We're going to rotate the right leg out to the side. So just be curious and just start as an exploration of this. Okay. So if it feels like the hips are following, or if there's some wobble through the pelvis, just come back and reset. So you're just turning the leg out to the side, and I'm just simply pivoting on my heel. There's no effort coming through my foot. The effort's coming through the upper thigh. And then you can try the same thing on the other side. And you might notice that your range, your ability to move the leg out without moving the hips or the pelvis is a lot smaller in standing, which makes sense because gravity and the weight of our body is having a different effect on the joint. All right. So then, with the legs a little bit wider than hip distance, we're going to rotate each leg out, again, without the pelvis moving. So now the knees and the feet are turned out because the thighs are turned out. And we're going to do a little bend in the knees, and then bring your hands to the back of the thighs. So let me just turn so you can see. So the legs are turned out, hands come to the back of the thighs, and then we're just pressing the legs into the hands. And in doing that, it might feel like the legs are really strong. It might feel like there's a natural engagement or tone through the abdomen. Maybe it feels like the feet are magnetized to the ground. Just notice your experience here. Breathing softly. Yeah, so we're creating more strength. All right, and then we can release and bring the legs back together. So I'd like us to come back into a wall sit. I'm going to take this off the wall again. So find a wall that you can lean against. We're going to bring the feet a foot and a half away from the wall, and then you're going to slide down just a tiny bit. Okay? We don't want the knees to go past the ankles. Just be in a place where you can hold it for a while. Sensing into the 3 points of the feet. The head can be supported on the wall. And oftentimes people ask me, like, should my low back be flat against the wall? I have a pretty deep arch here, so that's just my neutral. So some people's back might feel flatter against the wall. I'm not saying to like draw your belly in or push your back against the wall, because then that's creating a lot of tension through the front of your body and maybe through your back. So just however you are. I'm just going to hold and breathe here. I think sometimes we get overly stuck on what we think the alignment of our body should be, and in trying to create that ideal alignment, we're forcing our body to be in a shape that's creating a lot of tension and strain to hold it in that way. So I like to work with whatever is our neutral, and everybody's neutral is going to be a little bit different. And we're that way because of all the different patterns and experiences that we have in our body. And so it's through doing small improvements of our mobility and our stability and our strength that can shift and change how our posture is or how our alignment is. But that's why I don't focus specifically on alignment and trying to make our body a particular shape, such as like stacking pelvis over knees and shoulders over hips, because that can be a big mess. Anyways, I digress. Let's slide ourselves up, take the feet back, And just come up to standing and notice how you feel here. Yeah, cool. So let's come on down. I'm going to lead you through a short Shavasana. So you can lie on your back. If you want, you can bring a bolster or a pillow under your legs, maybe a low pillow or blanket under your head. If it doesn't feel great to have the legs down, you can keep the knees bent. The idea is to be supported and comfortable. Sometimes having a blanket or something under your hips can take strain out of the low back if there's strain in the low back. So I'm just going to sit up so you can hear me a little bit better. So just take a couple moments to settle. If you have an eye pillow or something you can place over your eyes to block out the light, that can help bring about a greater sense of calm and relaxation. Soft, gentle breath. Feel the contact points between your body and the surface that supports it from underneath. Notice sensation in and around your mouth. Sense your lips, the roof of your mouth, the insides of the cheeks. Feel the floor of your mouth, even sensation throughout your whole tongue. Feel the whole inside of the mouth. Sense your jaw, your nose. Feel your eyes, and the muscles around your eyes, and your forehead. And then begin to feel your throat, inside and out. Sensation in your throat. And begin to sense your chest. Sensing your lungs inside your chest. Can you sense the lungs filling with air as you breathe in and contracting as you exhale? Maybe sensing the space around your heart. Sensing the beating of your heart inside your chest. And moving down to your navel, sensing your belly button and the space around it. And noticing how the belly gently rises and falls with each breath in and out. Easeful and effortlessness. And then bringing attention down to your pelvic floor, sensing the space between your pubic bone and your tailbone and your sitting bones. Imagine your breath moving in and out of your pelvic floor. And now gently begin to draw the breath up as you inhale from your pelvic floor, past the navel, past the heart, up the throat, past the forehead, and then exhale out through the crown of your head. Let's try that again. Inhale, drawing up from the pelvic floor through the center line of the body, exhaling out through the crown of the head. And if that feels good, try it 1 or 2 more times on your own. Feel free to rest here a little bit longer, or you can bend your knees and roll over to one side, coming up to sitting. So there you have it. It's a practice that you can explore, pick and choose maybe what resonates with you. Happy exploring and have a great day.